Good evening, my wonderful AP Stat students. And yes, I'm talking to you, every single one of you. It is Sunday evening for me. I'm making your lesson for Monday and Tuesday. So both classes or all three classes, I'm doing that for now. We're going to do the same thing we did last week. I had several comments on this and a lot of positive feedback. I'm going to require something a little bit different. A lot of you guys did not email me back. It did not either didn't get that far in the video or just didn't feel like emailing me. I'm not too sure. But I'm going to have you fill out a Google form this time. The Google form is of course, just going to ask you for your name, your class period. It's going to ask you for the answer to the multiple choice question A. It's going to ask you to upload your answer from open response question number 3. And then it has one more multiple choice question, as well as a question about which one of the 3 open response questions you thought gave you the most trouble. I thought about asking you which one was the hardest to get a 4 on, but I think I'd rather just know which one gave you the most trouble. And most reason for that is if I have time to focus in on that particular topic, that I'll have time to do that again, either later this week or next week. The Stats Medic thing that some of you guys are going through and some are not, I'm going to recommend that. It does a whole lot of this right here. It gives you an open response question. It gives you you can answer it at your own willingness, your own leisure, and then he goes over, or the person goes over the E's, P's, and I's and what it takes to get those. And after I've almost done the whole thing. I got one chapter left. I've gone through the whole thing though too. Guys, it's big. That's big. Those are things that when I go over the answers on the test, in fact, 2 of these questions that you're going to see today are former test questions of mine that you guys have seen on the test before. For them to go over exactly what you need to get your points on it, I tried to go over those when we went over exams, but it's been a while since we've done that, and I probably do not do as good of a job as we did then. It's going to be crucial for you guys to earn as many points as you possibly can in the little bitty nitpicky things. Not necessarily showing the work, but using the correct words. A lot of times they're looking for one word, and you want to make sure you get that one word in there. And in fact, looking back on one of the questions, it's not one of these 3 here, but it's one of the ones that he does in Stats Medic. It asks for the independent and dependent variable, or the response and the explanatory variable. And it was the same question that I asked on the test, that chapter, and what I accepted on the test was not what would have gotten you an E. It answered the question, but it would not have gotten you the E. If you can remember, it was the smoking and the Alzheimer's question. Anyway, those of you that go through the Stats Medic, you'll see that. I think that I don't know how that cannot help you guys. It will take, if you do it right, it will take you a while to get through it. There's multiple choice questions at the end of each lesson. There's an open response question at the end of it. Now, the second open response question, he does not go over, or he or she does not go over. They do not go over exactly as a video. They give you it in words, and then you have to try to kind of manipulate it to see if you got the E, P, or I. But if you ever have any questions over that or things, I can try to help you. But your reading of those rubrics would be just as well as I do, as well as me. So that's our task for today. And I sent it to you as a PDF this time. I had a lot of people just say, if you could just send me that. And that actually works out a lot better. It takes me half the time to make my video. So I'm going to send you that as a PDF. If you're reading that now, or if you're doing that now, go ahead and stop this video and print that off, or use it, or just use it on your computer, or whatever you want to do. And like I said, the third open response question that has to deal with the schools and the funding, and you'll recognize it when you see it. I want that uploaded back to me. And I don't care if it's before or after you see the answer. Truthfully, I just need to see that you guys are doing something and getting your points. And I'm going to start taking some more grades. I haven't taken a grade in a while. I took one last week on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday, I guess it was. And I got to start doing that, and I got to get some more grades in for you guys. Although we're done with the learning part of it, I'm not done with taking grades. So I'm going to start taking some more grades. So that and how well you do it now, I'm not looking for right or wrong, but how I'm looking for effort. And if you do the effort, and again, if you want to do it after you read the answer, I really don't care. I won't know the difference, but I want you to have the answer. But I want to see the effort that you guys are putting forth. I want you guys to do well on this test. I want you guys to do well on it. And if you're not starting to study by now, you're going to be behind. Yes, it's not till May 22nd. Yes, that's a while away. But I'm not hammering you real hard at all on this review. We're doing a couple of things. So there's 3 open response questions. Typically, an open response question should take around 15 minutes. That's a little bit less than the one that they're going to give you on the May 22nd. I'm supposed to be getting some practice type questions from AP for those 2 questions. It has not come out yet, and I thought it was by April or sometime in April, and we're getting close to the end of April, so it may not be. I'm trying to look over my research. That 10% rule, guys, I think I about got it figured out. It comes down to mostly proportions and means, and it's looking like proportions require the 10% more than the means. But again, it's how the sample is selected. The best I can do, and I'm trying to get it down to where it's a fine-tuned verbatim exactly, hey, it's this and this, and not more of a wishy-washy. So, okay, that's enough. I've talked to you guys enough. I hope I haven't bored you enough. Sorry about taking your time today. Hopefully it's not too much. But again, today, 3 open response questions. I expect you to go through that question, write out your answers. Again, 2 of them, the first 2 you've seen before. I've done those on tests previously. So exams, you have seen those questions before. And so if you'd write those answers out on a piece of paper, again, it's better if you do that than think about it, because when you see the answer, you go, oh, yeah, I would have done that. Nah, I mean, it validates what you would have or what you should not have done. And then go through the rest of this video, and he will explain to you what the E's, P's, and I's are. I've cut it out all the other talk. The first video was 52 minutes or something, and this one won't even be close to that, and that's with me on it. I just cut all the stuff and just got the answer part. And grade yourself and be subjective about it, and you know, I don't care what you get. I just want you guys to know what you need to get the E's, or at least get the P's. But I's, they don't give you any credit. So a lot of times, if you can get the right answer, but you don't show the work or you don't use context, you're going to get an I, and that doesn't help you a whole lot. We need to get the E's and P's. So the multiple choice question, open response, open response, open response. The third open response, I'm going to want you to take a picture of it and upload it. It's on my Google Doc. You'll see it on the Google Doc. In fact, you'll see it right here. Here's your last name, first name, class hour, the warm-up question. So it's a multiple choice question. Don't be too confused. You can't push these. They're down here. Okay. Here's open response question. The third one, take a picture of the 3, and then you're going to upload the file right there. So take a picture, get it on your Google Drive somehow, and just upload the file. Here's one that I want you to know which one was the most difficult for you. And then here's a multiple choice question here. This one you don't have the answer to. Last time I did that, I had you guys email me that answer. I only had 2 or 3 of you get that incorrect. Most of you everybody put E, which was the correct answer. It was the probability one. I know that's been a while ago. It was last week at this time. Please start your Statmetics. I only got 37 you guys signed up for it. Again, I will reward you for doing that. Those of you that go through it. Now, unfortunately, or whatever it is, I get to see where you're at, and I get to see how many points you've accumulated. your points you're accumulating for your right answers on your multiple choice. So if you've gone through 90% of it, but you only have 20 points, that means you've only gotten 20 multiple choice questions right. And that's probably not very good. You get 30 choices, 30 on your very first diagnostic exam. There's 30 questions. Now, I will say of all those 30, I think there's 2 on there that you do not know how to do. I don't know why they're on there. I thought they removed all that stuff. But there are some on there that you do not know how to do, and that's okay. If there ever becomes an issue or something that you're confused about, please, please, please ask me. Send me a quick email. Send me a text over remind. Jump on a Google Meet and ask get on one of those. It'll just be me and you if you want. You can jump on my Google Meets that I've been doing, or make up your own. Send me an email. Say, hey, can we do a meet? And I'm at home all day from 7 to 3. And a lot of times I'm just waiting for something to do. All right. I've talked enough. I rambled. I just miss you guys a lot. And I hope you guys know how much I want y'all to do well in this thing. So that's your task for today. Do this Google Sheet right here. Send it in to me. That will count for your attendance. And again, it will go in as a grade. It will go in as a grade. I will grade the 2 open responses, or the 2 multiple choices. I'm sorry, and then the open response question. I'm going to look at that and make sure that you're putting forth some effort, guys. I got to start holding you guys a little bit more accountable than what I've been doing. All right, I'm done. I'll see you guys on Wednesday or Thursday or whenever the heck you open this thing up.
Jump right back to the homework problem that I assigned you yesterday, where we talked about sampling distributions. We've got this multiple choice question to take a look at, so let's dig in. Here's what it says. A large school district held a district-wide track meet for all high school students. For the 2-mile run, the population of female students participating had a mean running time of 8.8 minutes with a standard deviation of 3.3 minutes. Okay, let me pause right there. They're giving us the mean of the distribution for the females, and they're giving us the standard deviation of the distribution for the females. And the population of male students participating had a mean of 7.3 with a standard deviation of 2.9. So this 7.3 is going to be the mean for the males, and this 2.9 is going to be the standard deviation for the males. Now it says, suppose 8 female students and 8 male students who participated in the 2-mile run are selected at random from each population. Let X bar sub F represent the sample mean running time for the female students, and X bar sub M represent the sample mean running time for the male students. So here's the question. What are the mean and the standard deviation of the sampling distribution of the difference in sample means? So we know right away that we are in the world of means instead of the world of proportions. And it is also very clear here that this is a 2-sample problem rather than a 1-sample problem. So there's a couple of formulas that we're going to need to remember here. The first of which is how to calculate the mean for the difference in sample means. So the mean of X bar sub F minus X bar sub N is really just equal to the mean for the females minus the mean for the males. And we actually know those 2 values. They're given to us in the problem. The mean time for the females was 8.8 minutes, minus the mean time for the males was 7.3 minutes, which is going to give us a value of 1.5. So as I look at my answer choices here, this one is incorrect, this one is incorrect, so A and B are no longer options for us here. Now it appears that we have to find the standard deviation in order to get the correct answer here. So in order to get the standard deviation of X bar sub F minus X bar sub M, remember, this is where we want to add the variances, okay? So if I take the variance for the females, that would be sigma squared F over NF. And then I'm going to add the variance for the males, which would be sigma squared M over NM. And that gives me the variance. But I want to turn that back into the standard deviation. So now I need to take the square root of that whole thing. Well, now I just have to plug in the values that were given to us in the problem. So it's going to be the square root of the standard deviation for the females is 3.3 squared over the sample size of 8. And the standard deviation for the males is 2.9 squared over the sample size of 8. And so when I look at those remaining 3 choices there, I see an issue right here in answer choice C. We would not subtract the variances. We know we need to add the variances. And the thing that I see missing here is I'm missing the squared in D. And it appears to me that answer choice E is going to be the correct answer. So hopefully you did okay on that homework problem. And we are ready to jump into FRQ. So we'll go through grading each section with an E, P, or an I. And then at the very end, we need to turn that into a score out of 4. All free response questions are worth 4 points. And so I will show you the way that you can convert that into a score out of 4 after we grade each part. Now this one has 3 parts. So let's start by looking at the rubric for part A. What you needed in order to get E for essentially correct on this one is you had to have the correct answer. But not only the correct answer, you have to also have your work shown here. So the correct answer is 0.24. The work that I've shown is just this fraction here. That is sufficient for showing work on a probability question. The probability notation that I've included here is not necessary for full credit. What is necessary is the correct answer and then this fraction representing the work. Now you could earn a partial credit if you gave a correct answer of 0.24, but you didn't show any work. That would be worth a partial credit. And anything less than that would be an I for incorrect. Okay, let's move down to part B and talk about how this one was graded. So I'm going to write the rubric down here. This is the grading for part B. So here's the important thing to know for this rubric. There are 3 different probabilities that could have been used in order to answer this question. We looked at the probability of party Y given that they are a male, and we compared that to the probability that they are party Y given that they're a female. The other probability that could have been used to compare to either one of those is just the overall probability of Y, which we did calculate down here as 0.336. So here's what's needed in order to get full credit here. You have to have 3 components in order to get an E. So let me tell you what each one of those 3 components is. The first component is to have the correct computation of 2 of the values. And it doesn't matter which 2 probabilities you chose of those 3, as long as you've chosen 2 of them and you've done the correct computation for those 2. Then you get component 1. Component 2 is that you have to state the 2 probabilities are not equal. So somewhere in your solution, you have to state that those 2 probabilities are not equal. We did that right here. So we have our 2 probabilities calculated, and then we've stated that they are not equal. And then the final thing, component number 3, is the conclusion, where you're going to have to conclude that they are not independent. And we did that sort of a couple different ways. We said no first, but then we made it very clear that those 2 events are not independent. So you have to have all 3 of those components in order to get an essentially correct. For a partially correct here, you got to have 2 of the 3 components. Anything less than 2 components, and you're going to be stuck with an I for incorrect. Okay, and let's move down to the last part here. This is part C. And let's talk about the grading for part C. In order to get an E on part C, you have to show that the 2 distributions are the same. So it has to be the same distribution for males and females. And there are 2 components, right? So component number 1 is you have to have the correct proportions. And you can see those proportions here where we've calculated them, but you can also see them in the segmented bar graph, which matches the values that we calculated by hand. So we do have the correct proportions there. And then the second thing that you have to have is the correct labels on the segmented bar graph. So party W, X, and Y must be labeled in the segmented bar graph there. Now, a partially correct would be if you showed that they are the same distribution for males and females, and then you just had one of the 2 components. So maybe you forgot the labels, and that would drop you down to a partially correct on that one. So you have 3 different parts that you graded, each one with an E, P, or an I. And here is the rubric for turning that into a score out of 4. Pretty standard rubric here. You can see if you got all 3 parts essentially correct, that's what you need in order to earn a 4. A 3 would be 2 parts essentially correct and 1 part partially correct. And then there are several different ways of getting a 2 and a couple of different ways of getting a 1 there. Now, it is also possible to get a 0 if you don't meet any of this criteria. So let's start with how we grade section 1, which is part A. In order to get section 1 correct here, in order to get an essentially correct, you have to have the correct mean for both and work shown for at least 1. So you don't have to have shown for both of them. You only have to have work shown for at least 1. And when I say work shown, it could be the actual calculation with the numbers, which is like what we showed here, or you could show a formula that counts as your work shown. Now, partially correct would be if you made like a little bit of a mistake. One of the mistakes that students often make is that they round expected values. You do not want to round expected values or a mean. You can leave that as a decimal. It should stay as 17.7, not 18. And then one of the other errors that students sometimes would make on this problem is if they only calculated one of the expected values. So those are a couple of different ways that you could end up with a partially correct. Anything else would be an I for incorrect. Now let's move down to section 2 and talk about what's needed for full credit in section 2. So here's what you need in order to get an essentially correct. And this is a pretty long list here. There are 5 components that are needed for full credit here. So let's talk about these 5 components. Component number 1 is that you have to have listed all combos to get a difference of -1. Well, that's what we did here. There were 3 different combinations that would give you a difference of -1. Component 2 is that you have to have the correct answers for part B. And there were 3 answers for part B, this one, and this one. So that's component 2. Component 3 is that you have to show your work for part B. Well, showing the work is showing this multiplication that's happening here and here and here. So we do get credit for component 3. Component 4 is to have the correct answer for part C. Well, the correct answer for part C was this right here, 0.225. And you can probably guess what's coming next. For number 5, you have to show your work for part C. Well, showing the work in part C is showing that you are adding those 3 probabilities. So hopefully you're getting the message here that showing your work on your probability questions is very important. So you got to have all 5 of those components in order to get an essentially correct. Partially correct if you have 4 of the 5 components. Anything less than 4 components, and you are stuck with an I on this one. And let's get to section 3, the very last part here. Talk about how we would grade section 3. So in order to get an essentially correct, there are 2 components that are needed. First of all, you have to have the correct values in the table. And there were 2 of them, right? This value and this value have to be correct for component 1. And then number 2 is to have the correct final answer and shows work. So the correct final answer is here, showing the work is here. You have to have both of those in order to get component 2. And if you have both components, that gives you an E essentially correct. Partially correct would be if you had one of the 2 components. So we have graded this in 3 sections, each one giving an E, P, or an I. And then you would take that now and let's look at the rubric, which is going to look very similar to the one that we looked at before. In order to get a 4 here, of course, you got to have all 3 parts essentially correct. 2 parts essentially correct and 1 partial would give you a 3. Several different ways to get a 2, and then a couple of different ways to get a 1. Also remembering that you can in fact earn a 0 if you have less than what is established here. Pretty straightforward here, 3 parts, part A, B, and C. Each one has its own rubric for giving an E, P, or an I. So let's start with part A. In order to get a full credit E in part A, there are 3 components. Component number 1 is that the student has to clearly identify that they're using a normal distribution, and then also identify the parameters, which would be the mean and the standard deviation. Now, we've done that in a couple of different ways. Right here, we actually took care of everything. We've got the normal distribution, and then we have our 2 parameters. The other way that students can get credit, if they are calculating a z-score and they have clearly shown where they put in the mean and the standard deviation, that would also give them credit for component 1. And even if they use the calculator function, here's your normal, here's your 2 parameters, so they still get credit for component 1. Component 2 is to clearly establish what they call the boundary value. Well, the boundary value is this value right here, 140, which you see here and here, also shown in the calculator function there. And then, of course, the third is you got to have a correct answer on this one. And either the answer from table A or the answer from the calculator would be acceptable as a correct answer. All 3 components gets you an E for this one. For a partial, you got 2 of the 3 components. Okay, let's move to part B. In order to get an essentially correct in part B, well, first of all, you have to clearly say or answer the question, right? The answer to the question is to say less likely, and you have to have the following 2 components. Component number 1 is you have to have calculated the correct probability. And the correct probability here is the 0.005. And then number 2, you have to compare this probability to the probability in part A. Well, that's what we've done right here by making the comparative statement that that value is less than the value calculated in part A. Now, partial credit on this one is if you missed component 2. Now, there was another way described in the rubric in order to get full credit here on part B that had 3 components. Number 1, somewhere you had to clearly identify that this is the sampling distribution for sample means, as opposed to the population distribution. 2, you had to say that the mean is the same as the mean of the population at 120. And 3, you had to state that the standard deviation of the sampling distribution is less. That was the other way that you could get full credit. Without actually doing the whole calculation, you could have just explained in words what's going on in this picture. And then the third part, part C here, in order to get an essentially correct, pretty straightforward here. You got to have the correct answer. And guess what? Shows work. We're definitely seeing this trend amongst the probability questions. So this, of course, would count as showing our work, and this would be our correct answer. Partially correct is if you have the correct answer and no work. There is one other way you could get a partial credit. If you use the multiplication rule like we did here, but maybe you had the wrong probability there, at least you understood that you were supposed to use the multiplication rule here, and you could still earn a partial credit on that one. So we've got our 3 components there, or our 3 parts that we've graded E, P, or I. We need to now convert that into a score out of 4. And I think that this rubric is going to look very similar to the first 2. All 3 parts essentially correct for a 4, 2 parts essentially correct, and 1 part partial for a 3, and then several different ways of getting a 2, a couple of different ways of getting a 1, and even a possibility of getting 0.